Salahuddin and King Richard were both fighting against each other for their respective religions to gain power over the rights to rule the Holy Land of Jerusalem. To stop the bloodshed, they had to create a treaty to end the Holy War. The Crusades were a series of holy wars between the Muslims, Jews, and Christians for control over Jerusalem. Jerusalem is a holy city for all three of the religions. Muslims believe that the Prophet Muhammad ﷺ was taken to Al-Aqsa Mosque in Jerusalem. Christians believe that Jesus was crucified there, while the Jews believe that Jerusalem is the center of the world. The city had a lot of controversy surrounding it, even though Jerusalem means the city of peace.
The main leaders of the Third Crusade were Salah ad-Din Yusuf ibn Ayyub, also known as Salahuddin, and Richard I of England, also known as Richard the Lionheart. Salahuddin entered the Crusades with prior experiences of being a military leader. Richard the Lionheart also had experience doing military work as an authoritative figure. Salahuddin was a sultan or leader of the Muslims during the Third Crusades. He was born in Iraq to a military Kurdish family in 1137. Salahuddin spent most of his early years in Baalbek and Damascus, later on beginning to do military work like his family, which led him to quickly rise in his high ranks. He also worked under the Syrian ruler Nur al-Din and learned great skills and tactics throughout fighting campaigns against crusaders in Palestine. He used the skills he obtained from working with the Syrian ruler to conquer the Fatimid rulers of Egypt in 1171. In the year of 1174, Nur al-Din passed away from seizing because of a fever, which is the same year that Salahuddin was able to conquer Damascus, making the city part of his growing empire. 8 years after his success in 1783, Salahuddin conquered another Syrian city called Aleppo, and continued on his mission to conquer more cities, later on taking nearly the entire kingdom of the holy city Jerusalem.
Richard I of England, or Richard the Lionheart, was born into England's royal family in the Beaumont Palace in Ordox, England, in the year of 1157. He was the third legitimate son of King Henry II, and mother being Eleanor of Aquitaine. King Richard mostly grew up in France, where he and his brothers often fought against their father, King Henry II. This was due to the fact that King Henry II had incarcerated their mother, Eleanor of Aquitaine. King Richard was appointed King of England in 1189, when his father passed away. After his death, Richard created an army, mostly made of Christians but contained a few Jews as well, with interest in having control over Jerusalem. And with the help of the army that he created, he declared war on Salahuddin, who was the leader of Jerusalem at the time. Richard did not work alone. He also called on his ally, King Philip August of France, and Philip's army as well. In 1189, the Pope called the two armies to set out to reclaim Jerusalem and take the holy city out of the Muslims' control. Opponent Salahuddin fiercely defended his land with the help of his Ayyub army, but eventually King Richard was able to take a coastal city named Ark. After King Richard's success, King Philip left to go back to France because he was ill. After King Philip's departure, Richard the Lionheart gained control of Thrace. Salahuddin didn't want the Christians to gain control over the Holy Land, so with his army he fought against the invasion. The true turn of events happened in 1191 in favor of King Richard with the Battle of Ursfa.
The Battle of Arsuf began on September 11, 1191, as Richard and his army were traveling to Jaffa. After the Crusaders exited the forest of Arsuf, Salahuddin and his army attacked, which forced a battle between the two armies. In King Richard's favor, he and his army successfully defeated their opponents, leaving behind 700 murdered and injured Crusaders and several thousand Muslims. The disagreements between the armies proceeded until King Richard and Salahuddin fought their last battle against each other, which was named the Battle of Jaffa. After the battle, both parties decided to create a treaty to end the conflict between them.
On the 2nd of September in the year of 1192, Richard and Salahuddin agreed on a treaty called the Treaty of Jaffa, shortly after the Battle of Jaffa that lasted within the months of July and August in 1192. This agreement guaranteed a 3-year truce which allowed the Muslims to continue having control over Jerusalem, while still allowing unarmed Christian pilgrims and traders or buyers to visit the city. The two armies agreed on the treaty because King Richard perceived that he and his army could no longer succeed in the battle against Salahuddin, due to the fact that most of his army returned to England, and also because King Richard's brother Jonathan was attempting to take over Richard's land back in England. King Richard departed from the Holy Land 7 days afterwards, which was the 9th of September, leaving Salahuddin as the one and only ruler of Jerusalem. 1 year after the treaty was created, Salahuddin died in Damascus from a fever. King Richard the Lionheart left one battle just to go to another one. This time he was fighting with his brother King John and his old friend King Philip. Before he could reach England, his ship crashed and sea robbers stole from him. He was under captivity in Australia and Germany for a year and a half until he was finally set free by the Pope of Blondel. Richard the Lionheart forgave his brother and freely returned to England. In 1199, King Richard died from a bad treatment after a crossbow hit him in the shoulder. Since he had no children, he left England to his brother King John.
Many people say that if the two rulers worked together, they could have made a massive, undefeatable army. Nevertheless, King Richard the Lionheart and Salahuddin were both indeed great and powerful rulers, with two different religions fighting for one thing: Jerusalem.